David Caroll, hi. Thank you
Bonjour.
for being with us here at the Madi Keynote 2020. So it's awesome.
Great to be here.
So you're associate professor at Parsons School of Design, right? And you are known for the fight against Cambridge Analytica, which has been depicted in the movie The Great Hack. So it's been quite a journey, right, since the release of the movie. Can you get a little bit, just in a couple of words back, how did you get to make this movie, and how did you get to even have the idea to be such a whistleblower in this case?
I was approached by the filmmakers maybe 2 years before the film release. Mm-hmm. They were interested in my story because as filmmakers, they tell stories of journeys. So their previous films are important stories about technology and personal journeys. So the film that the filmmakers Jahan Nujain and Kareem Ammar made before The Great Hack was The Square. It was nominated for the Academy Award, and you're there in the revolution, following somebody's journey. And they were commissioned by Netflix to make a movie after that. And so they were looking for personal journeys. So they were attracted to my legal quest because it allowed them to tell the complex story through somebody's personal experience. By following our stories, it makes very human a complex issue. It's hard to understand, it's hard to care about, but I think by making us about people, that's what was successful about the film.
How did they find out about the story? They read some articles and they made some research, or?
So Caroll Cadwallader recommended them because I was a source for her reporting. So she reached out to me very early on because she was working on the story, and so as a source, I gave her permission to refer to the filmmakers, and then the filmmaker called me up and he said, I want to make a movie, I want to follow your story. And I said, this movie is impossible to make. You can't do it.
Why?
Because it's so hard to explain to people these issues. People don't understand. How can you make the invisible visible? How can you make people care about privacy if they don't understand it? So they proved me wrong.
So how do you use big data? You create patterns, right? You can explain how people are going to act in a certain way, like you say, predict the future?
The notion is that we can train a machine to try and think, and it can analyze massive amounts of data and find patterns in those data to make predictions. And the computer brain thinks in a different way than our brains. So we can't understand how it thinks, but it comes up with these predictions that tend to be quite accurate. And so that's the power of artificial intelligence, machine learning. Its food is big data, and the more it eats, the stronger it becomes. So as we produce data, it goes into machines. Machines create models. Models create predictions, and they get attached to us. They're trying to predict our behavior as individuals. Google can predict that you're going to buy a coffee at that Starbucks next Tuesday, and they'll sell Starbucks that future behavior. That's the holy grail in advertising and marketing. And so these machines are able to do that. The question is, what happens when it successfully predicts our behavior? They've made a bet. They have to win the bet to get the money.
So that they can sell the information to Starbucks, for example?
That's right. Things like that is, we're very close. If we can work with the biggest data set possible, we can create new technologies, algorithms. We can predict the future, basically, is the promise of big data. I don't know if that's true, but that's the hope.
How does that bring us to Cambridge Analytica and the whole case?
In 2016, a new company was created by very wealthy donors, and their goal was to overtake the Obama machine. They were using big data for elections. The idea is, if you can predict which districts will be the decisive voting districts, and you can predict which voters will decide the election, you can then target them very precisely. And so it was really about finding the tiny slice of American voters that would decide the election as a computer model.
And how do you target them?
What it basically used was just the normal tools of digital advertising and social media. The first step was you take the voter registration files, you create a model by combining that with other data. And then once you decide of the 200 million voters, maybe there are 100,000 that you want to focus on. You can then upload their names and emails into Facebook, and it gets matched to their Facebook account so that you can target them as individual voters. And then if they respond, target them more, spend more money on them, start advertising to them off of Facebook. The ads that follow you around, the messages that were most effective were messages about fear.
What has changed now since the movie and since the case, the Cambridge Analytica case?
Before Cambridge Analytica, the industry was not going to be regulated in the United States in any way at all. So we had to have this catastrophe to get to the point where technology could even be discussed as a regulated entity. Before it was like, don't regulate tech, you'll stifle innovation. Don't make new laws, it needs to be free. But then after Cambridge Analytica, everyone realized we have to put rules to the road. We have to have basic safety. We have to have basic rights. Data protection and privacy is like climate change. It is something that affects all of us, and yet we are made to feel personally responsible for it. When it is a systemic problem, we cannot save the world by becoming vegan and driving electric cars and stop flying. They make us feel like that's
it's true.
Just like privacy. Oh, you're on Facebook and Instagram, so you don't care about
you
your
don't
privacy.
care about that,
It's your fault. But it's not your fault. We don't have a choice. We have to be on Facebook. So the question is, how can multiple states work together to compete with the power of Silicon Valley? That it is a super state versus many states, and it is affecting our democracies. So it's like it requires a kind of climate change level cooperation.
And as you just said, like, what can individuals do? Because maybe, I can't get out of Facebook, but it's going to be difficult, or it's going to cut me off a lot of my friends, and maybe it's going to be complicated for my work. So what is the solution for the individual?
You have the right to ask for your data, so do it. Ask for it. See what you get. And if you're not satisfied with what you get, then call the cops. You have data cops. We don't have data cops in the United States. So in France, it's CNIL, CNIL is the
CNIL, yes.
So,
exactly.
So if you feel that data abuse is happening to you because you requested your data, you're not satisfied with the response, then call the cops and make them deal with it, because that's your right. And I don't think enough Europeans exercise this right.
Of course, yeah.
And we don't have this right as Americans. The only reason why I was able to get my Cambridge Analytica data is because they brought it to Europe.
Is it really interesting? Is it because, like most of the people, they just click OK, they accept, and they don't care so much. So how can we make it interesting for the people?
If we participate in looking back at who's looking at us, then we change the balance of power just a little. And that's very important to do. And it only takes one person doing it at one company to make a difference.